Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And at this time, I ask you to silence your cell phones, please. I'm Maria Roberts, Publicity Chair of the Keese School, and it's my pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker. Montgomery County's innovative Future Vote program engages local youth in the idea of civic participation. The project inspires a great deal of pride in the idea of participatory democracy, while also giving youth a chance to serve our county and serve our community. Future Vote is a signature initiative of Dr. Gilberto Zelaya, or Dr. Z, as he is often known. And he is the Community Engagement and Public Relations Officer of the Montgomery County Board of Elections. He's also responsible for ensuring compliance with the federal mandate that voting information be available in languages other than English for those whose first language is not English. He earned his undergraduate and graduate degrees from George Washington University. He and his wife and two sons live in Clarksburg. Please give Dr. Zelaya a warm Asbury welcome.
Good evening. So my name is Gilberto Zelaya. I am the Public Relations Community Engagement Officer at the Montgomery County Board of Elections. I joined the Board of Elections in 2003. After the 2000 census, Montgomery County was sued by the Department of Justice. There's a specific threshold that needs to be passed when the local jurisdiction must add an additional language beyond English. So in Montgomery County, it's Spanish. The threshold passed was 5% of the voting population for those individuals that met the requirements to become registered voters in the state of Maryland and specifically Montgomery County. My background is in public health prevention. Have no election experience when I joined the Board of Elections. One thing which was very interesting, Sarah Harris, our former deputy director, hired me, and she showed me we have these huge, massive machines like a Rolodex, and she pulled my voter registration card when I registered after graduating high school. I was 18. And the funny thing was, from the point that I registered and when I joined the Board of Elections, I was 29, 30, I voted once. So she looked at the card and she's looking at me and she's like, I know she's probably thinking, did I pick the right person? But it's very important because why did I only vote once? I felt disengaged. I didn't feel like I was part of the franchise. And so when I look at an initiative, an issue, whether it was HIV/AIDS prevention, teen pregnancy prevention, I've done protocols across Latin America and Africa, and you can name a major city in the US that work with many organizations. But civics and the aspect of voting and becoming a voter, there's steps involved, right? And a lot of times we have biases because we're born into this franchise. You have loved ones, parents that introduce you to the process. Montgomery County, about 30 to 40% of Montgomery County residents are born outside the US. The United States is one of the few countries that has elections on a Tuesday. Usually it's on the weekend, right? And individuals are like, why is it on a Tuesday? And there's historical aspect why. Most of us, in this room, I could see half of you, but back in the days, only white male landowners had the right to vote. So I think about half of this room didn't have the right to vote. I know I wouldn't. And so having said that, back then, the farmer would toil their land until Saturday night. Then they wouldn't take their mule or their horse because that's their farm equipment. You don't want to get injured or sick or stolen. Because remember, we didn't have voting precincts in the neighborhood level. You had to go to Annapolis, to the state capitol. So Sunday night, you started walking, essentially. Now, if you could afford to take a train or a carriage, that means you were rolling in good money. But most of us would have been farmers, so you walked. You walked as far as you could. You made it to an inn, a church, or family member's home or friend, or you just slept under the stars on a hammock. Sunday was the day of worship. You rested and you prayed. Monday, you started walking again, as far as you could make it towards Annapolis. Then on Tuesday, you woke up really early, you made it to Annapolis, you got drunk, you voted, you walked back to the farm. And I mean, essentially, that's what it was. That's why we vote on a Tuesday, when most nations vote on the weekends, okay? Now, when I joined the Board of Elections, your options were voting on Election Day, right? It's the first Tuesday after the first Monday for the general. The primary is dictated by the party, so it fluctuates from this time it's in June. But what happens is, at that point in 2004 was my first election, it was either on Election Day or you voted by mail. But you needed a rationale, either because of illness, professional reasons, you go into a conference in France, you needed a reason to vote by mail. Now you don't. You have open vote by mail, right? It used to be called, formerly known as absentee voting, now it's mail-in voting. We have 14 early voting centers, so there was an expansion in 2012 from 5 to 14 over the years, and we have Election Day voting. So the franchise has expanded, so it's very important that individuals know what mechanisms exist so you could exercise your constitutional right to vote. So we're no longer walking to Annapolis, okay? Now, Future Vote, the premise of the program, and this is, if you're tech savvy, we have a whole process where we want to meet our voters halfway. So at the end of the event, I do have voter registration applications. So if you're new to Asbury, you need to update your registrations. I have the forms. But also you could do it online. You just text the word vote to 77788. And the Maryland State Board of Elections, you will get their hyperlink and you could do it on your phone, okay? But you do need one of the 3 forms of ID, driver's license, a learner's permit, or a motor vehicles administration ID, and you will provide the last 4 digits of your social security. So you could register to vote online or update your registration. You could check and update your registration, simple prompts, text the word check or update to 77788, and you could update that information, or we could do the old John Hancock way and have paper, and we could do it with a paper and pen, and I would take those applications back to the Board of Elections tonight. And if you want to vote by mail, just text the letters VBM, that stands for vote by mail, to this number, 77788, and you could submit your request to vote a mail-in ballot. Okay, so we're trying to make this easy, but we still have a lot of voters that still would like the traditional ink, paper and ink, right? And we respect that as well, okay? Now, with Future Vote, also we're going to talk a little bit about this, the 3 ways to vote. So you could vote by mail. The early voting season for the primary is from the 11th through the 18th of June. In this area, the closest early voting center would be the Bower Park Activity Center next to Gaithersburg High School, but there's a total of 14 locations. And then if you're not voting by mail or you're not voting during the early voting season, Election Day is the last opportunity. Every voter will get a sample ballot mailed several weeks before the whole cycle, and on the back portion of the sample ballot will have where you will vote on Election Day. However, that sample ballot will have information on all the early voting centers, the time of operations, address, et cetera. And also information pertaining to voting by mails, deadlines, et cetera. Now, the advanced voter registration deadline is June 2nd. Obviously, I'm not asking you guys to wait until the last minute. It helps us kind of allocate ballot purchasing, how many poll workers we need, how many polling places we need to plan. So when we have a clean voter registration record, we can allocate the resources needed, and especially if we know in advance how many individuals will vote by mail. And we could kind of predict how many individuals by voting records, patterns, how many individuals will vote early, so we could kind of allocate the resources needed, right? We want to avoid lines on election day. That's the whole premise, right? We want to make sure that the doors open at 7 a.m., that the doors close at 8, but if you jump in line by 8 p.m., you will vote, no longer how long it takes to check in every single voter. Now, to register to vote, you must be a U.S. citizen. I was born in the Bronx, New York. My parents immigrated in the 70s and they became naturalized in the 80s, so either a U.S. born or naturalized citizen. You must be a Maryland resident, and you must be at least 16 years of age. When I was in high school, you needed to be 18, and over the years, they've lowered that age from 18 to 17, 17 to 16. But the first time that voter will vote is when they're 18 by the general elections. Now, part of the program today is talking about our youth engagement with Montgomery County, our young voters. We visit every single high school. Today, my staff was at Einstein and Gaithersburg High School. We visit all the public high schools and also private. We also work with homeschool organizations, Jewish day schools, Chinese day schools. We try to visit all the high schools as much as possible because someone's always turning 16. So someone's always meeting the requirements to register to vote. We try to visit these schools twice a year, so early fall and also in the spring right now after winter break. Since then, with the advent of the program, we've registered over 25,000 high school students to vote. Now, which is interesting in Maryland, if you have a loved one that's 17 years of age, as long as they turn 18 by the general election, which is November 3rd, that 17-year-old can vote in the primaries as a 17-year-old as long as they turn 18 for the general, okay? So we talk to the students about that opportunity. Many of them are surprised, they have no clue. Beyond civics in the classrooms, the 3 branches of government, you know, how the Congress is made up, the Supreme Court, one of the things that I see that is lacking is really the information how to enter the franchise in the state of Maryland. So it's critical that these young voters understand their constitutional right and also the different election laws established for Maryland voters. We do follow the federal constitution and the state constitution. Now, mail-in balloting. So, you know, it's expanded over the years. You know, we tell the students that the last day to request the mail-in ballots when we mail them out will be the 16th, but actually the last day of school has changed. Now it's the 18th because of all the school days. So obviously I need to update this PowerPoint. But for anyone who's voting by mail, it's important that you make that decision. If you have an interest in voting by mail, like I mentioned, I have applications with me. If you were on the permanent list and you want to get off the permanent list, you have to actively request that. I have the permanent mail-in ballot request form with me as well. So if you want to get off the mail-in ballot, I have a paper, pen, we'll fill it out, we'll take it back to the office. If you've requested to be on the permanent list and you have not voted in the last 2 general elections, so you didn't vote your mail-in ballot in 2024 or 2022, you will be removed from the permanent list. Your voter registration will remain active. We're talking about the mail-in, so you will not receive a mail-in ballot if you missed the last 2 general elections, 2022 and 2024. If you voted in one of the 2, you will still remain on the active list, so you will receive a mail-in ballot, okay? Future vote. So I joined the Board of Elections in 2003. Prior, I did some research on programs across the nation. Many counties like LA County, which is the largest county, they have about 4.6 million registered voters. Cook County, the boroughs in New York, they have programs that's really focused on high school seniors. At that time, in 2003, 2004, you needed to be 18 to register to vote. And in order to serve as an election worker or a poll worker or an election judge, they're all interchangeable, you needed to be a registered voter, which meant 18, live in Maryland, be a citizen. But there was a national trend that they were lowering the age from 18 to 17, 17 to 16. And in Montgomery County specifically, at that time, my nephews and my nieces were in middle school. So my niece came to me and she said, Uncle, do you have any volunteer activities at your new job? And I was looked at Sophia, I was like, what do you mean? Well, as a middle school kid, we could do community service. And then that night, I'm thinking, wait a second, middle school. So if my niece, Sophia, did community service in 6th grade, by the time she's in high school, if she volunteers at the polls with certain tasks, then ideally, when Sophia turns 18, usually that's around a senior in high school, then she could serve as a poll worker. Now, nationally, and we'll talk some stats, the average age of poll workers is in the mid-60s, right? And they were looking at ways to lower that age with the advent of technology, touchscreens, et cetera. We wanted to look at the technologies to incorporate, and a lot of our older judges really they weren't feeling that. They still like the alphabetized kind of voter rolls, and it was getting a little more complicated, tamper tape, chain of custody, et cetera. So Future Vote, that's where the advent of the program came, because I looked at participatory democracy and how can I strengthen that. So the goal was bringing in middle school and high school students before they reach the age of 18, introduce them to different aspects of participating in the elections. Now, full disclosure, they do not touch ballots, they do not touch equipment, they do not check in voters. They're greeting the voters, they're making sure the polling room is clear and free of partisan clutter. You get like the same questions like, excuse me, where's the restroom? So the election judge, as opposed to answering the same question 150 times, the student, the greeter, knows is down the hall to the right. Right? So it's like little incidental things that really goes a long way, especially if you're working from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. at a polling place. So as the program went on, we looked at being ahead of the curve as they lowered the age. So these are actually my neighborhood polling place. This is Wilson Wims, and it's kind of funny because these students, they're professionals now. So they're grown, but it's like a nice picture. And it's also hard to get permission because they're minors. So I got permissions from the parents, and they're actually my neighbors. So the gentleman has like a full beard. It's kind of interesting. But they're great kids, and they're civic-minded, right? And what happens is, as these young individuals work through the process every 2 years, so if they start in 6th grade, then 8th, and then 10th, by the time they meet the state requirements to pre-register to vote and to serve as a poll worker, they do participate. And one of the interesting things is we've worked with over 65,000 students. It's a big army of kids that are civic-minded. They know how to protect their constitutional right. They know how to request a mail-in ballot, especially if they go away to the military or college or they join the workforce after high school. It also lowered the rate of how many calls we got because now the students understand the process. If you look at the picture, you see that there's family in there, mother, daughter, younger siblings. I invite them all to come. It's not just for the student, because the premise is you're teaching families, not just the student, about the process. Because I'm not the one to say that maybe, some of the family members, I'm not asking if they're naturalized citizens or not. And it could be that they don't have status, and down the line, maybe a decade from now or 5 years from now, they do become naturalized citizens, but because they attended my training, they understand how to flex their constitutional right in Maryland. So it's kind of a teaching aspect. I'm teaching you how to fish as opposed to giving you a fish, okay? So what do the Future Vote kids do? They serve as greeters, They acknowledge the voters. They inform the voters, no vaping, no taking pictures, et cetera. They'll direct them to the available check-in poll worker, et cetera. And then you have the exit the future voter. They'll distribute the infamous I voted, yo voté sticker. They'll encourage individuals to fill out a climate survey of that polling room, maybe make suggestions. A lot of times, as you see, families will bring in their younger children, when the parents go and vote, and they'll see this child that looks like they're in 8th grade. How do you do this? Oh, you can sign up here, and Dr. Z will send you information to sign up your child. And if it happens to be a general elections, they'll contact you in 18 months as we get closer to the next election. And they keep the polling room free of clutter, which is important. Every 20 minutes, 15 minutes, they'll go around the polling room to make sure there's no partisan literature left in the booths. They'll just recycle that. So they're a critical part of the process, and they're also learning how to serve. This is the thing they do. They recycle the pens, keep the entrances and exit clear. They indicate the restrooms, which thousands, hundreds of voters will ask that, especially if there's a line. You want to use the potty before you get in line and whatnot. For those students who have bilingual competency, they could assist with some basic questions, especially checking in voters. But we do a lot to recruit poll workers to do that aspect or that job. Full disclosure, that young man right there, that's my son. So this is Sebastian. This is when he was in middle school. He's a sophomore in college, so he's going to come back and serve in the canvass. And so he has no option. He has to do it. So, but he grew in the process. So what I want my own son to experience, I want all the children who do the programs to experience that, okay? Also, it helps kind of answer the questions of individuals' concerns about the process. There's a lot of static happening right now around elections. A lot of it is noise, okay? And I tell individuals, look, you have concerns, I respect it. Don't care what party affiliation, all I care is that you're registered to vote and that you understand the full menu of options that you have. But before you complain about things that don't happen, serve as an election worker first, and then let's have lunch. Because in order for me to have a solid, grown conversation with individuals, if you don't understand the process before we have this discussion, we're gonna spin in circles. Serve as a poll worker first, attend training, serve your neighbors, and then let's have lunch. And then I'll answer your questions. So my son Sebastian, no option. He'll be back. So one of the premise of the election workers is once these students leave middle school and they reach the age of 16, we want them to really consider. We don't force them. We consider them. We ask them, would you like to serve as an election judge? I could tell you one of the hooks is, as opposed to earning community service credits, they could get paid now. So for a day of service, you'll get up to $250 plus $50 for training. It's a good way to make a little bit of money, especially with a summer primary. It's like a little summer job. It's a good way to make a little bit of cash. What do? They help run the elections. They open, they close, they dismantle the polling place. They help out with all the incidentals, and we train them. They may be 16 years of age, but they're fully vetted. They must pre-register to vote. They must take an online quiz. It's multiple choice. You have to pass that quiz. Once you pass the quiz, and this goes also to anyone here who likes to serve as an election worker. After you pass the quiz, you'll be prompted to select one in-person training session. It's 3 hours long. We have them Monday through Sunday. So it's morning, afternoon, evening. So whatever works for you works for us, especially with the high school kids as well. Our offices are here near the Salvation Army, up the road here on 355, so you're close to our main office, and we have a training center there. And then once you're trained and vetted, we look at your availability. You tell us if you want to work a full day or a part day, if you want to do early voting and election day or just election day. Whatever you want, we will serve. And it gives you an opportunity to experience the process and to really learn about the process in Maryland and all the safeguards that exist. So with the Future Vote, with the program, we've recruited over 10,000 high school kids to become poll workers. It's a sizable army of individuals that serve not only as future voters, but then as poll workers. And these students, they're bilingual, they're tech savvy, they have good knees, they have boundless energy. You can see them zigzagging in the polling room. If you've been to a large polling place, they're big gymnasiums. Trust me, I prefer to have a 16-year-old running across the hall, put a vote here sign or to help a voter with some language needs. But these individuals in Montgomery County, there are 10,000 high school kids that graduate every year. And then 10,000 new students are becoming middle school kids. So there's this funnel of endless volunteers. So the opportunity to not only enlighten them, but also to give them the opportunity to serve in their neighborhoods. At the precinct level, between 25 to 45% of our polling places have language competency. So that helps us meet Section 203, but as you know, especially Gaithersburg, I moved from New York to Gaithersburg in '84. It was very different than today, right? The county recognizes over 150 languages. And it's important that in the polling place, we have that language competency. Obviously, the Queen's English is important, right? But then also there's Spanish under Section 203, but there's Korean, there's Farsi, there's Amharic. And a lot of these students will help us meet because they serve in the community in which they live. And if you look at a community, let's say Gaithersburg High School or Wheaton High School or even Clarksburg where I live, those students really reflect the communities where they live, right? And they have the language competency. Similar to my two sons, Julian and Sebastian, they're fully bilingual in Spanish, and then they will assist as needed. And this is the numbers that really, it's interesting. So nationally, for the 22, there's the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. All counties are supposed to provide some stats. In 2022, if you look across the nation, the 16, 17-year-olds was at 1.7% of poll workers were high school kids. In Maryland, it was higher, it was 2.6, but Montgomery County, almost 10% of the poll workers were 16 and 17-year-olds. These are students that are U.S. citizens, they're registered to vote, they go, they're vetted, they're trained, they serve. But for the 2024 primary elections, they were about 14%. They made 14% of our poll worker force. And then if you look at the next cohort from 18 to 25, you go across 4.2 nationally, 2.8 across the state of Maryland, you see a dip. But in Montgomery County is 4.8 for that cohort in 2022, but in 2024 it was 10%. And we see an increase during the presidential elections. There's a lot of money spent. There's billions of dollars spent for the presidential elections. It is what it is. So there's more glamour around it. But we still have a high poll worker force in the midterm gubernatorial primary elections as well, and the general. And if you look overall, when you look at 23, 24% of our poll workers, the average age it's incredible. So nationally, it's 61. For Montgomery County, it was 54 in the 2022 midterm elections. And for the 2024 primary presidential elections, we hit 50. So that's that's over a decade. So we have a very young poll worker force. We have the youngest poll worker force across the nation. And Future Vote is the only program that exists in this nation. No other, out of 3,600 counties, no other county has Future Vote. We've gotten, you can name an acronym at the federal level, the county level, the state level. We've gotten numerous awards, and even globally. Globally, there's no nation that has a program like Future Vote. It just doesn't exist. Why? I don't know. I don't work for them. I think it's important that you have a pipeline of an opportunity to teach our young voters about the process. And so that's the whole premise of the program, is to really incorporate our young voters before they can even reach the age of registering to vote and to vote. As I mentioned earlier, the stipend is about $250 per full day. When I say full day, you show up at 6 a.m., the polls open at 7, they close at 8, or when the last voter has voted. Usually about 9:30, you should be done coming home. We do have part-day positions. So you see, I don't say full-time or part-time, because full-time is 8 hours. It's a full day, but part-day, we have shifts from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., and then from 2 p.m. to close. We also have closer positions and roamers. Roamers will roam around the county in a specific district, and they're trained to triage equipment, if they need more ballots, they need assistance, etc. All that information is on our website, okay? And the training varies between $20 to $70 depending on the position that the individual will serve. And that's pretty much a lot of information. You know, it's a great opportunity that we have, that the county was supportive of really introducing participatory democracy to our county residents. Children are our residents. Yes, they don't pay taxes, but they live here. And I think the opportunity for them to grow into the franchise, to understand their constitutional rights, both state and federal, and the fact that many of these, after they graduate from high school, whether they go to academia route to university or the military or the workforce, they truly understand what it takes to vote. They respect all of the work that goes forth to ensuring that those doors at 7 a.m. open on election day. They respect and they understand the process of early voting, and they understand the whole concept of canvassing 120,000 mail-in ballots, right? They understand the importance of a postmark. They understand deadlines. They understand voter responsibilities. And so the program, I think we've been blessed that it exists. And we're looking forward to continue the program. And, hopefully our neighbors will adopt it. At the state level, there is a program called the PAGE program, which focuses on high school, juniors and seniors. I call it Future Vote Light. It's nothing like middle school kids. For particular elections, we will recruit upwards of 2,500 middle school kids for the primary, and then those students will then also serve in their polling places for the general, and those students who turn 16 after the primary, then we get them registered to vote, and we introduce them to poll worker service. So that's the premise of the program. Hope you learned something, a little bit about getting ready to make your vote plan. I know there's going to be a portion for a Q for kind of asking questions, concerns that you may have. And like I said, I am your servant. I'm here to serve you and your needs. So I really appreciate the opportunity afforded to me today. Mm-hmm. So while they get the mics ready, I'm going to do a little PSA. So if you might have noted that the United States Postal Service has changed their postmarking process. So full disclosure, if you're voting by mail, number one, don't procrastinate. Don't hold on to those ballots, because we are charged and we're able to pre-canvass those before Election Day, which helps us on election night. We'll release any canvassed mail-in ballots. We will present those votes cast during early voting, during the 8 early voting days at the 14 centers, and any election day votes that were cast. Then any mail-in ballot that we have yet to canvass, then that's the reason it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to canvass them. That's law, that's scripted. If you tend to drop your mail-in ballot but you guys have a drop box on election day, don't call us the next day. Because last time I think we got like 30,000 mail-in ballots on election day. So we do like to get a little bit of sleep at least, and at least bathe and come back to the office. So don't procrastinate. I'm pretty sure you know what boxes you're going to, what bubbles you're gonna fill. Don't sit on it. Take it to your drop box. But if you have to take it to the post office and share this with your loved ones, I highly recommend you get out your car, you walk into the post office, and you ask the clerk to stamp it in front of you. Because now, if you're not using a drop box, just because you put your mail-in ballot in the blue collection bin on the intersection of, I don't know, Veers Mill and whatever, or in your building's mailbox, or it's not guaranteed it's going to get franked or post-date stamped that day. So just like make-believe is tax season, you're putting your taxes on the last day, get out your car, go into the post office. And remember, post offices close at 5, and our polls close at 8. So if it's 5:01, don't be surprised if your local post office will be closed. You better find a drop box or take it to the Board of Elections. But full disclosure, don't sit on those mail-in ballots. We want to get as many canvassed so we could get some sleep, and once we certify the elections, okay? But the postmark, walk it in, get it franked, and then you could rest. But give us a couple of days to process that. It's a very manual process, okay? Questions?
I'm from another state, so
Okay.
I'm just very surprised to learn that you can register to vote at 16. So could you clarify that for me?
Yeah, that's pretty much state law. You could register to vote at 16. You have to live in the state of Maryland. You have to be a U.S. citizen. However, the first time you will vote, you must turn 18 on or before the general elections. So for example, my son this year, Julian, he's 17. he will turn 18 after the primary, so he'll vote as a 17-year-old in the primaries in June, because he turns 18 after June, but before November. So in this state, you could pre-register at 16, but it doesn't mean that you could vote. So now we have our database, so we go by their dates of birth, and then what happens is on their birthday, they'll get a notification that they're an active voter, and if their date aligns with the general elections for them to vote, we will share that information with them.
Okay, thank you very
Okay,
much.
you're welcome.
Hi, I had the opportunity to serve in the primaries in 2024, and actually over here in Hefner, and we had student helpers, and I can tell you they were much faster and more comfortable with the computer screens where you had to log people in than we were. So the training was good for them.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's one thing we've noticed with our high school kids, because like my kids, I'm pretty sure they look at their phones before they brush their teeth. And, they're so tech savvy. And the one thing is unique is, the reality of if, for example, my son said when he was checking in voters, he was like, for every one voter that Mr. Tom, checked in, I checked in 5. And then I remember the gentleman that walked in, and he's like, Dr. Z, that's your son, right? I'm like, yes, why? I don't know if he's doing a good job. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, he's just too quick. I'm like, I know, but the voter has to affirm their information on the VAT card, like the name, party affiliation, address. But it doesn't make sense. I'm like, I'm trying to keep up with him. I was like, don't keep up with him, because then that's where you make mistakes. I'm like, he's not getting commission. Like, it's okay. They're just quicker. And so then I told my son, Sebastian, slow down. Because then I get it. I understand. But they are tech savvy. Yes. But thank you for your service. You should come back. Now, since you served in 2024, if you serve in 2026, for every full day, you get an additional $100 bonus. And big bucks. And for each half day or part day, you'll get an additional $50 bonus. So we want you back.
Well, I just think this is a wonderful program, and I have grandchildren in Gaithersburg, so I'll have to make sure they know about it. The oldest one is now 15.
Okay.
It's wonderful that these kids are prepared to vote once they turn 18, but how do they know who to vote for? It seems like from the time I first voted, I get a lot of publicity about where to vote and when to vote, but it's hard to find out the information about the candidates so that I can choose the people that I really want to vote
Yeah,
for.
great question. One of the challenges that we have also as an agency, we don't provide information on the candidates. That's why we work closely with the League of Women Voters. They have the voter's guide, and they have information regarding the candidates, their positions, et cetera, and also online and calling the candidates. They spend thousands of dollars mailing you things. I'm getting them at home, right? And so you just have to do your due diligence and your research. But yeah, that's one of the challenges that high school kids will tell us. Also, the one thing we notice is a lot of them will select unaffiliated. And then we tell them, in Maryland, we have closed primaries. So if my son, Sebastian, knows that if you show up at the polls and you want to vote for X individual running for, say, council, you need to be aligned with that individual's party. Otherwise, you'll vote school board. And like I told him, I don't make the rules. We just have to follow them. But we have closed primaries. There's some legislation right now that may open the primaries where individuals could select a party during early voting or on election day. There's some administrative headaches that we will have to kind of absorb, but it is what it is. Once the law, if they change the laws, we'll follow them as scripted. So, but that is a good question. So the League of Women Voters is a great resource online, and we tell the students to understand that you do have closed primaries in the state of Maryland, and they need to do their due diligence to do the research. Online. You also could sign up for the Voters Guide, the League of Women Voters, and then they'll mail it to you as well.
This is a wonderful program. Now, I'm sure being through the program and being an aide and so on, they're probably more likely to become a voter later on. Do you have the data that you can make the truth of that
Yeah.
in comparison to other places that do not have that kind of training?
So a couple of years back, we were working with the University of Maryland because we have the database of all the future voters. It's the time commitment needed to extrapolate that information. Unfortunately, the student who was working on it then went to grad school, and then everything was left in the air. And I was like, oh, it's hard. But that's a great question. That's one thing that I want to get a grasp, because I know, because I see all I call them my kids. I see them with full beards. It's like, Dr. Z, I voted, or I'm in the military, and I get stories. And another thing I want to work on is a kind of alumni page, because we have a lot of students now that are on the Hill working with senators. And I had one student, it was funny. He took me to lunch, and he's like, yeah, he does election law. So I said, well, then you owe me 10% of all your earnings moving forward. I gave you the bug. So, but yes, great question. And hopefully my goal is between now and the presidential, we have the database, and then we have the Maryland voter registration database, and we could do extract, right? And then we could pull voting history. It's just a matter of finding the precise time to do it, because right now we're in an active election. So I need to do that once we certify the gubernatorial midterm elections, probably in December, right? Once we certify it, but I want to sleep. So then hopefully by January, February of 2027, I want to do that extract to kind of lay over these students, these 65,000 students, to see what the turnout, but also I want to see if they're voting by mail too, because I can't assume all 65,000 kids still live in a county. It's a very expensive county to live in, and a lot of kids move out, especially when they go away to college, and they will stay there as transplants. During the 2020 COVID presidential elections, remember, it was just a mess, right? The primaries, we started to vote by mail, et cetera. One thing was really interesting. We had over 600 standby judges while there was this national call for assistance. And we're like, and the news was under public information officer, and they're like, do you guys need help? I'm like, no, we have a lot of judges. And what happened was a lot of the future vote students who already went to grad school or undergrad, because of the economy, they lost their jobs and they moved back in with their parents. So they're like, Dr. Z, I'm back home. I got nothing to do. I got plenty of time. Do you need me? And I'm like, yes. And so the students in their early 20s came back after undergrad or grad school. And so that's another thing I want to follow, that I didn't think I was going to be there for 24 years, to be honest, right? And so now you have these young adults coming in and serving or getting married. So I would love to kind of follow them. So until I win the lottery, I'll still be at the Board of Elections. But yeah, I definitely will plan to do that. And then once we have information, I'll definitely share it with the public. And no questions off limits, so don't.
I've lived in here for 4 months, and I don't know where I registered to vote in
Okay.
Montgomery County. I never missed an election in Prince
Okay.
George's County, not any, not national, not global,
Good.
not state, not, I'm a voter. So where's the starting point?
So we have a date after today. So we're going to talk outside. I'll look up your voter registration to see, we could text the word check to 77788. We'll check if you're still registered in Prince George's. If you still are, I'll help you to update your registration. Okay? So make sure. And if you want to vote by mail, I'm all yours. Okay? And we have the applications as well. Okay? Yes.
I just had an election integrity question. So with all the concerns these days, are boards of elections across the country talking to each other and sort of comparing notes about what their concerns are,
Yeah.
et cetera?
So one thing that we do after we certify elections is we do best practices. We had the city of Boston visit me about 4 months ago, talking about future vote, but also talking about outreach. My team, we do between 400 to 500 outreach events every year, even in the odd years. So this is one of 400 to 500 events. We do more outreach events, engagement opportunities than the entire state combined, all 23 counties and Baltimore City. someone's always turning 16. Someone's becoming a naturalized citizen. There's no reason why a local board of elections should wait 90 days before an election to do outreach. That doesn't make any sense, right? So when it comes to integrity, we do work with our local jurisdictions. Last week, actually, we had a powwow with all the local boards of elections about Future Vote and giving them high-level tips on how to start, even at the local high schools, because there's been a push from the State Board of Elections to work with the State Board of Education. But that tree is way too high. I'm like, why are you so pressed about, going up the chain of command? Just call your school. Just say, I'm with the Board of Elections. We want to work with you. And if you need to, I will help you out. So best practices, we communicate a lot with the local boards, but also across the state. We don't have all the answers, but we do get a lot of awards. And so once we get these different clearing awards from the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, the Governmental Accountability Office, the Department of Justice, we get calls to the office about, I heard about your texting prompt, I heard about your Future Vote program, I heard about how you cure to text mail-in ballots, I heard how you clean your voter registration doing confirmation mailing. Like, how does that work? And then we share. We share all the information. It's not proprietary.
I wondered if you are going to expect any changes in the voting situation, like federal observers or anything like that?
So we always have observers. They're part of the process. Unfortunately, they're bored because they're just observing, right? There's nothing out of the ordinary. Sometimes we prefer observers to become poll workers because they really will understand the process. Just observing someone checking in voters is not the same as serving the actual voters. But they are part of the process. We embrace them. We send them to the State Board of Elections. They need to get certified. They bring a certification, documentation. They just can't just show at a polling place and say, I want to observe. I say, well, I want to observe, you leave because you don't have a certification, right? So there's processes. And then we'll talk to them and in concerns because it benefits us educating them at that moment so they truly understand. And then we tell them, serve as a poll worker. Not only will you learn something, you'll make a little bit of money. So, yeah, but they're part of the process. Yeah, we welcome them. Those are questions the gentlemen are here. How many on your team? So full-time, we are about 30, 31 career Board of Elections staff. We bulk up to about 75 to 80 at the office. And then we will have our seasonal team until probably a little past Christmas, New Year's. And then we go back down to the 30, 31 full-time. I know when I joined the board 20-odd years ago, we were about 21, but we've expanded because the county has grown. We're over 720,000 registered voters. We're the largest jurisdiction, and we have about 120,000 voters already as a permanent mail-in voting list. So from COVID, it exploded. And keep in mind, voting by mail has been in existence since the Civil War. When Lincoln wanted his troops to vote, that's where it started. And so there's a lot of safeguards around that. And then, all the mail-in ballots are barcoded. If a second issue comes out, the first one is cleared. There's no ballot stuffing, but like, let's say you're my family and you tell me, Gilberto, can you take my mail-in ballot? If I take everyone's ballot in this room and I put it in a drop box, every drop box is under surveillance 24/7. So if you look at the feed, I'm stuffing the ballots with all your ballots. So now people call that ballot stuffing or ballot harvesting. No, you gave me your ballot. You just asked for a favor. And it's legal in the state of Maryland. Now, if you're asking me to fill out your ballot and make use, that's different. But I have no issues dropping off a ballot if the voter requests. Remember, you have to sign, sign the affidavit, et cetera. So there's a lot of checks and balances as it pertains to voting, especially voting by mail. And then also under Section 203, one of the biggest questions we get is, I thought you need to speak the Queen's English to become a naturalized citizen. Well, yes and no. There's a 50-20 rule or 55-15 rule, which means if you're 50 years of age and you are a U.S. Resident, green card holder for 20 years, you could bypass the English civics exam. You could do it in Spanish, like my grandma. My grandma became a naturalized citizen at 70. She could say hi and bye and no. But she became a naturalized citizen. If you're 55 years of age and you have legal residency for 15 years, you could bypass the English civics component to become a naturalized citizen. And also, Section 203, for any history buffs, the Articles of Confederation, it's kind of the pre-draft, first draft of the Bill of Rights and Constitution. Remember when we picked the fight with England? We needed a militia. We didn't have a professional army. It was just a bunch of farmers with muskets. So what happened was, in order to kind of galvanize a militia, right, you needed to communicate to a farmer that you want freedom, you don't want to pay taxes, we're going to fight England. But a third of our residents in the 13 colonies only spoke French. And the other third in the mid-Atlantic colonies spoke German. So you're talking to someone who speaks French in Vermont, they're going to be like, oh, sacre bleu. They don't understand what you're saying. So the Articles of Confederation were translated into French and German. So Section 203 comes from that. It's not because there's a lot of one type of community. There's historical value from the past, from our founding fathers. They needed a militia, they needed muskets, but Sir Jacques only speaks French. So how are you going to convince Sir Jacques to go to the cause? You had to communicate in their language. So the Articles of Confederations were translated into those two languages. So that's the advent of Section 203. Yes?
After I retired, I served as election judge through 3 cycles. The last time was about 15 years ago. And listening to you talk about the situation with election judges today and comparing it back then, there were some striking differences. The most striking one was the pay. As I recall, I got about $65. That included the training, the precinct meeting the night before, being there at 6 and not going home until I was released, which one year with an ice storm was after 10 o'clock.
Yes, I remember that one.
And all that for $65 or so. So I suspect, I would hope anyway, that with higher reimbursement nowadays, that helps in getting election judges.
It does. Yeah, you're right. They've over the years increased the stipend from 65 to 250. But we tell our voters, if you look at this as a job, and if I tell you you have to work 15 hours on election day, and if you're good at math, which I'm not, then don't do it. Because you're gonna be disappointed when I think it's below minimum wage, right? But we tell the individuals, if you're too busy, that's fine. It's okay. Maybe not this one, maybe the next one, right? Because what happens is recruiting them, get them trained, get them vetted, and all of a sudden, I don't want to do it. You leave a hole. Now we're down a poll worker. And as you know, when you're down a poll worker, they're calling the hotline, I need more bodies. I was like, we don't have any. So, but yes, the stipend has increased. Milk is more expensive. And so, and also there's other expenses. If you need to board your dog for the day, right? You cannot go home and take a nap or get your lunch, right? You're gonna have to now Uber it, right? Or bring it with you. There's cost there. So there's always incidentals around serving. And so we recognize that, it's an adamant effort that's, being placed, and helping in your neighborhood. So the 250 is a nice thank you and another $100 bonus if you come back.
So I don't know if this is a fair question, but do you know what kind of civics education is in the MCPS curriculum now? You know what?
Well, I went to MCPS last century, so I don't remember anymore. But I know that we're right now. I have a lot of friends at the school board, and I'm talking about introducing the components of future vote in both middle school and high school. So every Maryland student must take and pass NSL government, right? And then what I really want is if they could just give me one class, future vote and the aspect of voting in Maryland could be taught in one class period. There's enough wiggle room so I've been pushing for the last 4 years. So the long answer is, my goal is by 2028 or 2030, that future vote is part of the MCPS curriculum. I tried at the state level. It's too much of a headache. It's just too much. It's easier for me to dig in my backyard than in someone else's backyard. So, so the goal 2030 or before, future vote, the component of training, the recruitment of poll workers, the academic aspect of voting in Maryland, and updating that curriculum as election laws change, so then the students will have the latest and greatest information. So when they do become active voters, they know how to flex their constitutional right. So that's the goal. So crossing our fingers. You good? All right, perfect. So remember, I have the applications. If you have any questions, I know I'm going to speak with you to make sure to see if your record is updated, and if not, we'll update it today. I appreciate you guys. Don't forget to vote, make a vote plan, and I encourage you to serve as an election worker, and I got a $100 bonus for you.